T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy. Tom is on vacation, so it's just going to be me today, just a solo show. So please make sure you light up the comments with some questions. It'll make this a lot more fun than it probably would be otherwise. So let's not bury the lead. Let's get into it. The big news this week: CJ Gardner-Johnson is not a Texan anymore. I'm a little shocked at the news. I think at face value it is shocking information, but in the time that has passed since the news broke, I think we've gotten a lot of very important context that makes the move make sense. I think the likes of DJ Bienemy, Big Sarge, and a lot of those guys have done a very good job of giving some context to this and making it make sense. And so with that, let's speak to the sequence of events and kind of give some context to that. So CJ Gardner-Johnson acquired in the offseason in a trade that sent Kenyon Green off. And that's an important place to start, in my opinion, because it's important to note that regardless of how that trade went, the Texans came out of it without Kenyon Green, which is a win. So it is a less good trade. I think that CJ Gardner-Johnson being the talent that you receive back makes that trade a lot better than it obviously would be just sending a pick and Kenyon Green for a lesser pick. As it would appear has happened. Now I need to look back at that trade, but I'm pretty sure that's how it went. So right there up front, I think that maybe there was a breakdown in how they scouted this, or I think it could have gone like, I think it's Arrested Development, that one bit where the guy's like, everyone thinks they can, bring in this superstar safety and fix him, and they're all wrong. But maybe we could be the ones that get it right, So I don't know if maybe they just didn't get a lot of time to look into it, or if D'Amico was just like, Nick was like, they're offering CJ Gardner-Johnson. What do you think? And D'Amico was like, talented safety, count me in. And looking at what they did with Stephon Diggs, a player that was kind of viewed as a cultural pariah, if you will, they assimilated him to the Texans mentality and culture pretty well. And the only thing that really went wrong there was the, injury, obviously. So I think that, it feels a lot like that, but this is just how it goes when you don't get that right. Let's see. We've got Thomas Fitz 17 in the chat. One of the OGs, one of the originals. What did he provide to our team that made a difference? If anything, he gave up touchdowns that we ended up losing because of. That's very important. And I think that DJ Bienemy did a really good job of highlighting how his efforts kind of directly hurt the team. So we fast forward through, there's obviously that brutal leg injury that injures CJ Gardner-Johnson. There's questions of if he's even going to be ready for week 1. And then by some miracle, he goes from could be out, 4 or 5 weeks to playing week 1, which, knowing the Texans training staff and medical personnel, that in and of itself is a miracle, because that's not how that usually goes. So he's good, he plays, and I think that to the naked eye, the untrained eye, and this is calling myself out included. I mean, a lot more, fans that are fans of the team, really into it. It's not to discount what you are, but you see what happens on the field, and sometimes maybe, myself included, you don't catch exactly what's happening because it's all X's and O's and very technical stuff that's past the point of like very basic, conversation about the Texans. And in this case, like, you look at a lot of the plays that are referenced by DJ Bieniemy. For example, this most recent week, it looks like Brian Thomas Jr. burns Kamari Lassiter over the top for that play that sets them up for the 10-yard Travis Etienne run that ultimately puts the Jaguars in front. But if you look back at the replay with DJ Bieniemy's commentary on it and his understanding of D'Amico's defense, you would understand that CJ Gardner-Johnson's responsibility was deep middle, and he jumped a route by Parker Washington that was not his responsibility. And I take it that Kamari Lassiter noticed that and tried to cover for him, which is not the first time that's happened, because against the Rams in week 1, there's a similar situation where Kamari tries to cover for him and can't make up for what he lacks defensively, what he wants to do. I would compare it to, and this, I don't know if this might rub some people the wrong way. A lot of people thought that JJ Watt had a similar tendency along the defensive line, which was to abandon responsibility for glory. Thinking maybe you know better than what the offense has schemed and that you can get the jump on it and be a superstar. And it seems like that's what CJ Gardner-Johnson wanted to do. Wanted to kind of jump in there. And I mean, to be fair, JJ Watt a lot of times was such a game breaker that I don't think it really mattered if he followed what he was supposed to do. He blew up the play a lot of times, but I can recall once or twice where that came back to bite him, but it can only come back to bite you so many times before it's a severe issue. And it feels like every game it was something that was biting CJ Gardner-Johnson. So let's see, you low-key cursed this season, brother. Oh no, I don't think that was me. Anyway, sorry, I'm reading the Instagram comments right now. Sorry, Chris _was_he, if you believe I cursed the season, but I'm just trying to enjoy some Texans football. But looking at it, so CJ Gardner-Johnson is trying to play hero ball, and then the reports come out after he's cut that he was clashing with people in the locker room, was critical of other people, and was not quick to take accountability for his mistakes. So I think it's important to look at that part, because there's some people that heard that and were like, oh, it sounds like this Texan secondary didn't want to take advice from a Super Bowl champion. And I mean, there's no denying he has a Super Bowl, but if we know what we know, which is that he has been directly at fault for a few Texans losses, and in a way, like, I think there's very few plays this season where you can look at them and go, this is directly the reason the team lost. And there is always that thought process of, yes, the team lost in that moment, but something should have, could have, would have happened earlier that would have prevented that moment from being a thing. But looking at it just, as it stands, we can look at like about 3 different plays where if CJ Gardner-Johnson is where he's supposed to be, the Texans likely win those games. It's not as direct as, say, Henry To'oTo'o missing a tackle on Baker Mayfield on 4th and 10. That is very directly responsible for the Texans losing the game, as if that is a tackle, the Texans would win. But there is reason to believe that if CJ Gardner-Johnson is where he's supposed to be, those plays go differently. And so when we go back to the discussion of, oh, well, these players in the locker room don't want to take accountability from a Super Bowl champ, it's like, I would have trouble taking accountability from anyone who couldn't take accountability for themselves. If CJ Gardner-Johnson very clearly is not operating within the scheme and is trying to play hero ball and it's detrimental to the team, the last thing I want to hear is, hey man, on this one play, if you'd have been here, we could have done better. It's like, dude, if you would just understand your place in this defense, we'd be, 2-1, 3-0. We'd have a win under our belt. So I get that people want to look, well, he has a Super Bowl. That's cool. But I think there's more to it than that. And so all that spiraling into a trade request, him wanting out, I think D'Amico made the right call, just based off what's been reported. I think that CJ Gardner-Johnson is a great talent, but that's the thing that makes it a tough choice. The thing that makes me think that D'Amico is growing as a head coach is that he was presented with this. I mean, regardless of how it goes, there are going to be those people that say, wow, you gave up on a talent because you didn't want to, you didn't feel like you could accept feedback from your players, or there's a lot of different viewpoints that'll come out of that. But, D'Amico knew it needed to be done and did it. And I can respect that. And I think that it could go a long way. I think that there's a lot of season left to be played. There's a lot of precedent that is set by where the Texans are that would count against them making the playoffs. But I do think that there's a lot of football left. Let's see, before the season, especially. Let's see. Next question. Thanks, Thomas, for asking all these questions. What should we do about Nick Caley? The play calling on offense is our biggest problem, I feel. And we look the same as last year. Mixon is out, but how much of a factor is it? I mean, here's my thoughts on the Nick Caley situation. And I just put out a video today on the Bleach Report app. If you follow on there, I do twice a week. I have the Texans Daily, and then the other 2 days are, Ruben and Harley, if you're familiar with Mr. 713 and Harley Duggan. So if you're looking for Texans content, that's a good place to look for it. But here's the thought on it, right? Let's say that the Texans want to move on from Nick Caley, which I am still against at this point. I think it's entirely too early to make that decision. It'd be very rash, and here's why. So where do the Texans go first? Well, let's assume the average fan's opinion matters here. And let's say that, the Texans keeping most of the offensive staff from last season. Really, the only change was maybe adding an assistant offensive line coach and bringing in Nick Caley. Other than that, the offensive staff is pretty much the same. So when we look at it that way, you don't want to hire internally. So what do? You look around. Well, it's week 4. And college, NFL, whatever level you coach at, if you're actively coaching a team, the appeal of leaving that position, even for, like, let's say you're a quarterbacks coach let's look at in Syracuse, Jeff Nixon. I think he's the head coach there, actually, but you're coaching a team. NFL is a great opportunity, but you want to enter the NFL with the opportunity to succeed. Being asked to come into a Texans offense that has not been done well, has been failed by the GM in terms of roster structure to be, at ease in terms of installing anything. You have to consider the skill deficiency on the offensive line when installing any new scheme. You then enter into, can you get anyone to come in from outside? Is there anyone from outside that wants to risk their only shot at being a coordinator and potentially in the future a head coach in the NFL on what looks like a setup? It looks like a situation where you're set up to fail. And the answer is no. I can't think of anyone worth hiring that currently has a job in football that's thinking, yeah, I would love to go and set up the offense for the Houston Texans, who have shown nothing but suck this entire season. I am in Nixon's OC for Syracuse. Thank you, Thomas. So OC for Syracuse, do you want to leave being an OC at the college level for what is very clearly, like, in the movies and whatever books you read, when you are watching something and the main character's like, this feels like a trap. It's like, that is the feeling that every OC that's currently employed, every offensive-minded coach that is currently coaching is going to feel being offered the Texans offensive coordinator job. So then you're now left with hiring internally. We've already described that hiring internally is an awful idea if you have any sense, because anyone who's been in the building for the past 2 years has already been a part of what is the problem. Even if they have a different offensive mindset, they now have to install a new offense in week 4 of the NFL season, which would lead to that offense looking about the same as Caley's does, because it would look in preseason form until the offense can get it and function at a high level. So with that in mind, even if it gets worse, which I think Ryan Fitzpatrick said it best, the offense I don't think could get worse. If it does, I don't think you have a better shot than waiting it out and seeing if Nick Caley can get it. So this is the offense the team has been running all offseason. This is an offense that, is coming from a mind that has at points shown that he should be able to run an offense in the NFL given the opportunity. And maybe it's growing pains. Maybe he's just not meant to do it, but I don't see a rash decision like bringing in a new offensive coordinator. Granted, your option, one option that does stick out, right? If you're looking, you have to look internally. And if you are looking internally, Gerard Johnson sticks out immediately, but he would basically be a lateral move. It feels like you'd be putting a play caller who's never called plays at the NFL level in charge of an offense. You're going down the same road. You're just deciding to do it in the middle of the season. You look towards Bill Lazor, senior offensive assistant. He's had some success coming in the middle of the season, running an offense and being more successful than the incumbent offensive coordinator. He did it with the Bears a while back. He's experienced. He is what I think a lot of people wanted the Texans to go for this offseason. And he did get an interview for offensive coordinator this offseason, if I remember correctly. But he's really the best option, I think, internally that you have. But either way, I think sticking with Caley for the duration of the season makes sense. And then at the end of the season, you look at what D'Amico's done. You look at, Nick Caserio's hand in this roster construction and how it affected the ability to roll out an effective offense. And you're stuck making a decision who goes, because I think the Texans organization historically has been patient. You look at, Gary Kubiak getting all the time he got when he really didn't give any signs of deserving it. There were points where I think a lot of people wanted him fired. And I think there's a lot of Texans fans that have, negative thoughts about him in the past because of how his early years as Texans coach went. But if you go the patience route, I think that could even, if Nick Caley's offense shows any signs of life, you have to give him another year to implement it. But that therein lies the issue, which is that this team is coming off of back-to-back AFC South championships. This is a team that comes in with expectations. This is very different. In 2023, there was no expectations. So when Bobby Slowick did what he did with this Texans offense, and there's some people that have said that's probably the best supporting cast that CJ Stroud has had too. People just didn't know it going into the season. You enter with no expectations, so anything you do is impressive. Whereas next game against the Titans, I think that Nick Caley could put together 2 or 3 really solid drives and look really bad the rest of the game. And the feeling coming out of that game, if it's any bit close, which it probably would be at that point, would be, wow, I mean, he did something, but like, that's only signs of life. It's too little too late, because the expectations were high. And I think I'll admit my part in that. I found the optimism in the Nick Caley hire, even though I wanted a more experienced offensive coordinator, and talked myself into, oh yeah, Nick Caley's going to be the answer, and kind of glossed over some very glaring things, which is that one, I don't think it's 100% guaranteed to fail at this point, because I think that there always should have been the expectation that Nick Caley was going to take a minute to, get rubber to meet the road when the time came. And so we're still in that grace period in my mind of, okay, maybe he's just kind of working through it. But all in all, his coaching tree is diverse, but if he's not drawing significantly from the McVay side of things, I think that it's destined to be a little underwhelming, to say the least. But let's look at the comment section real quick. I see. Remember when I said Howie Roseman would trade you a Ferrari for a bottle of water and then walk away laughing as the Ferrari exploded when you started it? What a beautiful comment from the OG, Brandon Hallam. Thank you for that. It seems very accurate now. I agree with you. That is a very accurate statement. Let's get back to the Instagram chat. Let's see. What do we do with Caley? I already talked about that one. Oh, well, and then, I mean, if Mixon's there, I think that you might feel better about it, and here's why. I think that Nick Caley having Nick Chubb and then an assortment of running backs kind of played Russian roulette with who was to spell Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb showed up and put up 4.5 yards a carry. And then Caley now has to figure out who can rival that in this running back room. And it took him a really long time to come around to the notion that that person was Woody Marks. And with Damian Pierce a healthy and active, I think it's only a matter of time that before his time on the roster is up, and I think they're basically using him as a bookmark for Joe Mixon. But I think if Joe Mixon plays, I have a lot of trouble believing this offense doesn't at least come away with a win. I think there's a couple of plays where if you're alternating between Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon, you're getting two guys that can both do the same thing, and so you probably get more yards in spite of the offensive line's performance. So yeah, I think that Mixon would have made a difference. I think the Texans being in close games means that any bump in their direction could have tipped the scale. Um, let's see. You can ignore the second question. What do we do with Nick Haley despite defense? Oh, yeah. Wow, that was okay. No, yeah, I see what you're saying now. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat right now, guys. If you're in the chat and you got a question, drop it on me. I'm here solo. Tom is having a much better time than most Texans fans are because I don't think he's aware just how bad this past weekend was for the Texans. So, shout out to him for having that blessing and also missing the Astros tanking right at the end of the season. Just a really blessed week for him to be away from it all. Let's see. So the offense looks the same from over the years. Am I wrong? I don't think you're wrong. And here's why. Okay. I don't think that Nick Caley is running a comparable scheme to Bobby Slowick or doing it at the same level. I think that what it is because it's not coherent and it looks bad. Our first frame of reference as Texans fans is Bobby Slowick. Could there be comparable elements to the scheme? Sure. I mean, they both came from, I think a part of Kaylee's informative experience is the Shanahan tree by way of Sean McVay. So there could be similar elements, but I think that honestly right now what it is that Kaylee's still figuring out how to run an offense, and he doesn't have the benefit that Bobby Slowick had of coming in, a new offensive coordinator with a rookie quarterback that no one was tracking and no one could have guessed that no one saw that Texans team coming. And when you have the element of surprise, there is some things you can get away with that Nick Caley's not getting away with because everyone knows what CJ Stroud is. And so Nick Caley's not helping him through the way he structures that scheme. But, I do think that it looks as bad as the offense did last year, if not worse, but I don't think it looks the same. And one example that I take from that is that his use of screens is better. I think that he has had more success with the screen game than Bobby Slowick was last year. So that's the first example that comes to mind, in my opinion. But yeah, and Thomas Fitz kind of covers it too. There's a lot of people that think the offense looks worse this year. And that was always a risk of hiring an inexperienced play caller. I think a lot of people, myself included, I cannot emphasize enough, maybe went the optimistic route. And I talked myself into ignoring some of the potential pitfalls of a new offensive coordinator because his background, I thought had some positives to it that would help him overcome that. And so far we haven't seen it. I don't think that means that we can't see it. I just think that it hasn't happened yet. Do I think that there's a deadline? I've been talking about the bye week as my deadline, and knowing that the Texans, after playing the Titans, which is their best shot at not being winless going into the bye week, could possibly, the Ravens will play the Chiefs this week, which is not the same level of concern for them as it would have been in the past, but it is the Chiefs. And so the Ravens could come into the Texans game in week 5 needing a get back. And if there was ever a team to give it to them, it's this Texans team. So I think that if we're looking ahead and we're trying to get a feel for how this could go, I might give some grace after the bye week. What I really need to see between now and then, though, is there's been moments in this Caley scheme that have worked really well. And one thing you'll notice, and I think that D'Amico is picking up on it too, because he, in his talk with, I think it's Coffee with Coach, whatever show he does with the Texans voice, Mark Vandermeer, he referenced 2-minute drill as being a point where CJ Stroud has shined, and that's true. The Texans every week have pretty consistently produced at a high level in 2-minute drill, in a hurry up offense, in an up tempo thing, but it feels like that's the only time they do it. So even if you look at the end of the Rams game, the Dario Gamboa fumble, I think, erased what was a very good drive for this Texans offense. It was one of the few times where it felt like he was in his zone. He got CJ into his zone, and the offense was moving. It was unfortunate that turnover halted that. But against the Jaguars, that drive, 2 drives in a row at the end of that game that were pumping until a turnover happened at the end of each of those drives. And that's the shame of it is that Nick Caley is only really giving this Texans offense 1 to 3 that I can count really solid opportunities and drives, in any given game. And more times than not, they're either ending in turnovers, or in the Rams game, there was a really good drive at the end of the first half, but obviously he was playing against the clock. So once they got into field goal range, they kick a field goal. So a lot of his success has been muted by mistakes, and you want to see his progression get to a point where he's putting together so many of those drives that if one of them has a turnover, it's not the end of the day. Like, it's not like, oh, well, this was the one drive the Texans were going to get. So, and it's something that was tossed around when CJ Stroud was being drafted about his game against Georgia. If it's happened once, it can happen again. And we saw that in CJ's rookie season. And we need to see that with Nick Caley. He needs to show, hey, I understand. I learned from not just what he doesn't do, but what he does, and creates a better offense. Sorry, I got my alarm set for 8:30. So yeah, I think that only way to go is up, and that's Ryan Fitzpatrick said that on Fitz and Wit. He predicts that he thinks the Texans. The Texans can go from 0-3 to the playoffs. In fact, he said he's sure of it. Here's a viewpoint that I've seen a lot, and I feel it in myself to some extent, but I've kind of talked around it and thought about it. A young QB needs an offensive-minded head coach. Alec Miller, by the way, 27, is the one saying this on Instagram. I don't want to be right about this, but I think it's obvious CJ doesn't have a real mentor to learn from. I think that what everyone was concerned about with a defensive-minded head coach was that the Texans were going to cycle offensive coordinators in a carousel because CJ was going to do good, and those offensive coordinators are going to get hired away as head coaches. And what's happening now is that this offense is so inept that even though CJ is good, he's still entered into that carousel of offensive leadership. And I can agree to some extent. I think he's found himself on an island. I think he gets leadership from D'Amico. It's just, I agree that there's probably something he needs in terms of an offensive-minded mentor. Do I think the answer is moving on from D'Amico? No. I think that the risk you take when you hire a coach from one side of the tree or the other is that you will be struggling to figure it out on the other side of the ball if you don't do it right, don't time it right, don't plan it right. That's why a lot of people push for the veteran, experienced offensive coordinator that wouldn't have the motivation to be a head coach and could be that guy who's consistent, and we haven't found that yet. So if Nick Caley turns it around and does well, in 2 to 3 years he will be in the head coach hunt and will likely sign on to coach another team, and then the Texans will have to do it again. The question is, can they have an order of succession set so that it's not an issue? So yeah, I understand where you're coming from there. Bring Case Keenum back as head QB coach. He's got to finish his career as a quarterback first, but I have always liked that mindset as well. I agree. When have we ever had an offensive head coach? Gary Kubiak, everyone hated him because he got a long leash, and then when he finally got the offense right, he got 2 or 3 years to try and go for a title, and then Matt Schaub consistently got injured or threw a lot of picks. So there you go. 14-3 incoming. Man, that would be the season of the century. All that to lose in the divisional round too. Just kidding. See, personally, I feel like we are calling too many deep route tree plays instead of quick West Coast plays, for example, quick slants. This is a great point because Nico Collins, you call out specifically, Nico Collins excels in it. watching last season, one of the only things that was a lifeline for this offense was that on an in-breaking route, Nico Collins was unstoppable. And yet we haven't seen a lot of that. We haven't seen a lot of quick plays. It's staggering too, because CJ Stroud, if I remember correctly, went like 22 of 27 in passes that were under 10 yards. And then anything beyond that, I think it was like 3 of 8 or something like that. It was like some crazy low number where he wasn't hitting deep. And it's because the offense didn't work the momentum to get him set up, to give him the opportunity to do well at that. So, I mean, I don't know. CJ's such a momentum guy. They need to learn how to call an offense that lends itself to that. I agree with you, Corey. That is very true. Let's see. Our offense is constantly playing with defenders in the backfield. That's what looks the same. I see, Corey, you're on one right now. I just looked at your comment on YouTube and then on Instagram, and you're just really painting a picture here. And that's the thing, is that in that point of like using a lot of Nico Collins' strengths are in breaking routes that would be very short, where you could drop CJ on a 3-step drop or even a quick drop and get the ball out. If we look at the Buccaneers game, it's a prime example on the other side of the ball. That Buccaneers offensive line was literally starting a center at right tackle and had injuries suffered throughout the game. They're like body bag season, just not talented by any stretch, because they've had to basically patchwork together an offensive line. And yet Baker Mayfield's getting the ball out in 2.5 seconds. So then that mitigates any problems. How likely is it, as good as Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter are, that they're in the backfield in 2.5 seconds every single time? It's not super likely. So I think that has been a big issue with this offense, is the quick game. And it lends itself back to what D'Amico has already said this week, and I hope he's talking to Nick Caley about, which is that tempo is something they should be using more of, because it plays to CJ Stroud's strengths. So agree with you on that. I think there's a lot of smart fans in the chat tonight. What do you think about the Texans? Do you feel like they can turn it around? I think that it all lies on the offense figuring it out. This defense is top 5 in points allowed at 17 points. I actually, one of my coworkers, it's funny, I hadn't actually tweeted about that. I meant to tweet about this. One of my coworkers is a Raiders fan, and he came into my office on my first, I don't work Mondays, but on that Tuesday, and he came in, and the first thing he did was complain about the Raiders offense. Mind you, this is a Raiders offense that has had a 300-yard game, a 293-yard game, almost 300-yard game, and has probably only really lost because their defense needs to get right. They had a bad offensive game against the Chargers. That's really it. This offense, if that offense was the Texans would be 2-1. Easy, 100%. And yet this guy's like, yeah, well, and the offense, I'm like, have you looked at your defense? He's like, what? Oh, the Raiders defense usually gets raw over the course of the season. I said, well, let's look at it. I mean, how many points per game is the Raiders defense allowing? 24 points per game. They're 25th in the league. And this is good. I always say this, and I get mixed reactions, because some people are like, yeah, duh, Captain Obvious. That's very obvious. And it is a very obvious thing to say. But general rule of thumb, right? I want my offense to score more than 20 points, and I want my defense to allow less than 20 points. The defense is doing that for the Texans. The defense is holding up. That's why I never got the call to move on from D'Amico for an offensive-minded head coach, because, like, what are you going to do to sustain this defensive success? It's obviously resting with D'Amico. He's the one who calls the plays and runs the defense. So as much as Matt Burke is a rising star because he's the coordinator for that defense, I'm not sure what his how heavily involved his role is in all of that. But looking at it, the Texans defense is doing the job. The key is the offense. And that's why I don't think there's any hope in a lot of people's eyes, is because so far we've gotten no inclination, no inkling of anything to go on to believe that this offense can do what it needs to do in order to make this team a winning team. If they can do it, bravo. I think that, someone said 14-3 earlier. I look back to when the Texans rattled off 9 wins in a row back in 2019. I look at that, and that is something that's very feasible if this offense can consistently figure it out and produce, long drives and score some points, put some points on the board, move up, start putting up 20 points a game consistently, So yeah, I think they can turn it around, but I mean, what are the odds? The Texans are 0-3. There's been 6 teams in history that have made the playoffs, one since 2000, and that is the 2018 Texans. I don't like the prospect of going through all that effort to beat the odds and be the second team to do it this century just to lose in the divisional round. So, and I think that the 2018 Texans lost in the wild card round to the Colts after winning the division from the Colts. So, anyways, that's my thoughts on that. Let's see. I've never had another Texans fan speak my exact thoughts until the James Roy. Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that. I think we're both thinking that, what's the phrase? Great minds think alike. That's where we're at right now. So we have no play action without Mixon, it seems. I think we have no play action in Nick Caley's scheme, it seems, or at least, that's what it was early on. I think he got better in the recent weeks, but early on he was not even running it at all. And play action, only running pass plays from the shotgun and run plays from under center, a huge tell if the other team is paying any attention. And these are all things that I think come from him being an inexperienced play caller. And that's why I think it can get better, but I think that he needs to get better. I'm not going to make excuses for him, but I think that the Texans' best course of action is to stay the course and hope that he can figure it out, because that's really all they've got right now. Let's see. And also, this next comment reminded me, the lack of usage of the rookie wide receivers the Texans picked in the place of Tate Ratledge, who has done really well as an interior offensive lineman for the Lions. If you want the offense to get right, start using those guys. They've shown that they should get some targets. Let's see. I think if Higgins, Hutchinson, and Noel get more plays in the offense, they would explode. I agree with you. And as someone who has Xavier Hutchinson in my 32-man guillotine league, any points he gets is massive to me at this point, because we still have 26 teams left in the league. So that would be huge for me. Let's see. We should have running a 2-minute drill every drive, because they seem that he does better when it comes down to 2 minutes. I agree with you. 100%. I don't know about every drive, but I think that, and this is something that motivated a lot of people, myself included, into wanting Chip Kelly to be the Texans offensive coordinator. He patented that spread offense that was basically an SEC killer, and took out a lot of good Bama teams with clones from Auburn and Texas A&M. But at Oregon, he was running we're going to run spread offense, hurry up, no substitutions. And, I thought that offense would fit really well with how CJ Stroud functions, tempo, keeping things going. And I think if Nick Caley is true to his word and wants to make adjustments based off what he's seeing, I think it should be pretty readily apparent to him that CJ does well in the quick game, and it should be incorporated. I don't want to say every drive, but I think more than it has been, it should be incorporated. So our offense looks so boring. I just said the other day, man, I can't remember the last time this offense was fun. There's moments like, against the Chargers in the playoffs, the Buccaneers back in 2023, and here and there against the Steelers, a lot of the 2023 games, but it feels like it's been a trillion years since I got to have fun watching the Texans play football. And I just want it to go back to being that way. So, yeah. Let's see. We should have him run 2 minutes. Oh, yeah. I already read that question. Oh, you already sent it. You just sent it again. Sorry. My bad. Bobby would have had them rookies starting by now. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have trouble believing that most sane offensive coordinators would see their team take a vote of confidence in them by getting them more talent at the skill positions and then not use them. But I've been wrong before. The college football knowledge needs to be addressed. Yeah, I like going into research on that era, and one of the reasons, obviously I lived it, watching Chip Kelly tear it up with that spread, but looking back at it, it was really helpful in understanding this Texans defense and Jalen Petre's vitality. I read, I should post the link on my story at some point, but there's an article with a Nick Saban interview where he talks about it. And if you don't know, Nick Saban was a coordinator on the Browns with Bill Belichick back when the term star safety was coined, and it's what Jalen Petre does for this defense. But even back then, it was something that was there, and it kind of informed Nick Saban's thinking when trying to counter the spread, no subs, offense that took him down with Johnny Manziel, Cam Newton, those guys. And what it comes down to is having those hybrid players on the field that are ready to do more than one role, so that if you are put in a position where you can't sub, at least you have someone who you have confidence in to, function out there if they are left out there. So in the star safety role, it's, Jalen Petrie being a safety who has more of a linebacker build, can be an aggressor in the box, but also cover. Will Anderson Jr. is a product of that train of thought, as a more limber edge who's like quicker, can get outside, basically like a linebacker that's got a hand in the dirt. That's something that's a product of that too. So I think it's important to, keep an eye on those things and have an understanding of it. And I always like a good read of something that informs my opinion on like how all that works. I'm a very technical mind. I like to see that stuff. Let's see. Best Texans page by a long shot. Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that. Oh wow. Corey's over here on YouTube. I gotta get back in. Let's see. Tempo and quick game is such a huge, is huge. I'm just curious why they haven't been able to figure it out. It's sad because our D is doing its job. We've lost 3 one-score games, and our O looks awful. Encouraging? No, not at all. I think that it's encouraging that Joe Mixon could be back after this week. I think it's encouraging, and we hadn't heard anything about that, which I don't want to go down that path again of the Christian Harris injury, where we see someone sit for 4 weeks and then get told that they're going to sit for a lot longer. But looking at it, I'm not encouraged by our offense. Don't get it twisted. I just think our best course of action is keeping Nick Caley and hoping that he figures it out. He's not giving me any reason to hope. I outside of maybe a few, like I said, I explained it earlier, there's a few drives that the Texans have had this season. I can count them all in one hand, but they have happened where this team did good, didn't rely on a chunk play or a huge, 3rd and 25 conversion. They just moved the ball down the field methodically, scored a touchdown, and then, held the ball long enough that the defense got a rest. And that's really all they need to be doing. As cool as it was that after the defense picked the ball off, CJ hits that 50-yard pass to Nico. That's what this Texans offense has lived on pretty much since CJ got here. And when those plays go away is when you get exposed as like, okay, well, can you even hold on to the ball? Can you sustain a drive? Give your defense a break? We've seen the product of not being able to do that, in that when the defense is left with one final stand to, put the game away, they're so incredibly worn out that it's just not a good, feasible to ask it of them, if you will. Let's see. Slants out, passing to RBs out of the backfield is what we need to see more of. Rookies, Joe Mixon should help a lot. Once quick game is established, that helps run game. That sets up a play action. I think that Woody Marks did really good. It was a real shame because they got him in the flat. I think it was the Buccaneers game. They got him in the flat and he got a 27-yard gain. And then the Texans said, wow, that was really great. That worked really well. And then we never saw it again. And I think maybe Nick Caley's just in his own head overthinking it. He's like, well, that worked once, so it can't work again. And I'm not in that same mindset. So slants, anything in the quick game, I think the rookies could contribute given the opportunity, and they have to some extent. I think the worst play that any of the rookies on offense has made was, outside of obviously Ursary had a rough game this past week against a really good pass rush, but Jaden Higgins got the ball taken from him. That was a pick that was credited to CJ Stroud in the Rams game, but outside of that, I think they've, when given the opportunity, looked really good. They just haven't been given a lot of opportunities. Let's see. I'm somewhat encouraged by the fact that the offense, or if the offense can slightly improve, I feel like we may be a team playing it on Wild Card weekend again at 3:00 sharp. Make sure you're there. Yeah, I agree with you, man. All right. Well, on that note, thanks for hanging out with me, y'all. This has been good. It's been fun. Let's hope and pray that this Texans team can get right. It'd be a real shame to hold that hope all season and not see it happen. But here's the biggest thing that gives me hope is that Nick Caley's a man of his word and actually makes adjustments. And I mean, I've seen improvement each week with the offense, but it's just snail's pace. It's not significant enough to be like, oh, look, this offense is getting it. It's significant enough to go, wow, look, we finally scored some touchdowns like we should have. We are still the lowest scoring team in the entire NFL, but okay. So yeah. Next week Tom will be back. And then he'll on the previews and recaps. If you're not tuning into those on YouTube and on wherever you listen to your podcasts, we've been posting our pre-recorded previews and recaps. So I'll have a solo recap out later this week, and I did a solo preview earlier, but usually Tom's with me. So make sure you're following me, follow Tom, follow someone to make sure you know what's going on with the bullpen so that you can support us, because we really appreciate y'all hanging in there and supporting the number one veteran-run Texans podcast in the entire world, or at least as far as I know. I cannot confirm through official statistics, but I believe it, and I just like the Texans believe that if they just believe it hard enough, they'll be better. It seems that's where we're at right now. So, all right. Thanks for tuning in. I've been James Roy. You can find me at James Roy NFL, wherever you get your social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, or X for you you younger folk. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.